Hey, Sens fans, welcome to today's episode of the Senstennial Podcast, where we are joined by the NHL Draft analyst that we know and love here, Will Scouch. Will, how are you doing this evening?
Matt, it's doing well. I mean, I'm fine. I'm looking forward to getting a one-on-one with you. You know, it's kids table hour. It's gonna be fun. We get to have some fun, and it's good to be back. It's been a while, and always a joy, always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you again for coming on. It feels like it's been ages since we've had you on.
I know.
So, for the people who haven't listened to our show when you've done guest appearances or watched the podcast when we've had you on, do you want to give a little bit of a rundown on how you go about, tracking the prospects that you do leading up to the NHL entry draft, and maybe just a little bit of insight into kind of what you do when looking
Yeah,
at the draft?
yeah, of course. So I'm primarily data focused, but the way that I do it is I collect my own data. So essentially, I'm watching individual players and their ice time over the course of the season and just gathering a data set on as many guys as I can, and really just trying to track their impact on the game. You know, I don't do too much like modeling and predictive work. It's mostly just really trying to fundamentally capture what it is exactly a player's doing on the ice and how successful they are at it and all of those things and how they intertwine and combining that with the actual video and performance that the player's actually putting on. And at the end of the year, you just kind of blend it all together and see what you can find. And yeah, so it's kind of a mix of sort of traditional, just sort of seeing what's out there. I'm in the rinks once in a while, checking guys out. But largely, it's all about sort of the data collection, how the video works with the data, and sort of finding the I guess you could say hidden gems or the value that there is in the draft, and also sorting through the guys that everybody clamors over at the beginning of the draft every year. So it's a combination of all of the above, but my approach is a little bit different than a lot of people.
Yeah, and you've been at this for quite some time. I think I
Yeah.
found your channel back in 2020, leading up to that great draft for the Ottawa Senators. So, but you know, over that time, have you had a chance to reflect on your methodology while doing this and refine how you go about tracking prospects? And maybe do you ever look back on draft and be like, okay, I had this guy ranked maybe higher
Mhm.
than what he should have been, lower than he should have been, and take that to try and improve how you go about future iterations when you're looking at prospects?
Yeah, I mean, I think that something that I do well is past the earlier parts of the draft, isolating guys who are probably better bets than a lot of other guys that go drafted off the board. And just sort of trying to figure out, a big question I answer is, which of these 20 players nobody really thinks about or talks about deserves to be right there with those top 30 guys, top 20 guys, and why. And so those are the types of guys that I always love to try to dig into and uncover. And they don't exist every year, but it is a lot of fun to like pick up those guys. I think for me over the years though, a big shift I think has been really appreciating the defensive side of the game a lot more. Like early on for me, there was a lot of focus on, I'd say, skill and a lot of focus on offensive output. And, I kind of excused a lot of the sort of defensive side of things a little bit or thought it was a little bit overvalued. And I do think that to a certain extent, like the defensive value in the draft is a little bit overvalued, but especially with regards to who you can get later on. But in regards of like, I watch the playoffs every year, and that's the ultimate goal, right? You're drafting guys who you think you can win a Stanley Cup with. And so for me, the Stanley Cup playoffs are not always the most beautiful hockey you've ever seen, right? It's all about sort of energy. And a lot of the time, it just comes down to who wants to win the most, who is the most competitive group that will wear you down the most and just plow through the playoffs. And so trying to find guys that do that while also actually driving really good results at both ends of the ice, it allows me to sort of set aside maybe some raw production stuff, and it really allows me to focus on style of play, where the numbers are coming from. Like there are guys that drive really good results that I don't necessarily believe in as much, and there's the opposite that's true. So it's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect is real, I guess is what I'm getting at, but over time it's really become much more about just boiling it down to who do I think you can win games with? Who do you think you can win Stanley Cups with? And kind of set aside the I guess the fun factor, like that flash, that skill, and try to sort of see it as a bonus rather than like the focus of what you're trying to go after.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and it's interesting to hear that insight from you and how you've changed things because it's always from a more casual perspective. You
Right.
watch the highlight videos and you're like, oh, that guy's sick. And then you get into more of the details on like, how do they carry the puck through the neutral zone? How
Mhm.
successful are they at that? What do they look like when they're back checking, when they're in their own defensive zone? Are they just standing around? Are they engaged in the play? So there's so many other things that go into it. So it's really interesting to be able to look at those other results and see, like you said, more than raw production, what is a player doing out there?
Right. Yeah.
Now, of course, this is obviously an Ottawa Senators podcast,
Oh yeah.
so it would make sense if we didn't talk about the Sens. Now, unlike past shows where we've had you on and we're here moping because the Sens are in the basement yet again, Ottawa is actually well outside the top 10 this season. They are drafting at 21 this year.
hmm
So, who are some players that have really caught your eye this season who could potentially be available around that slot for the Ottawa Senators?
So, would you want like my personal guys who I would really love to see available there, or are you thinking like if you're a Sens fan and you know what the Sens are all about do you want like a guy who just bleeds black and red?
So, Will, the next question was going to be about Ottawa archetypes. So maybe go with
Okay,
guys
okay.
that
So,
you
yeah.
like, and
So
we'll go from there.
Okay, so if it's me in that range, I mean, there are guys I think that will slip to around there that I think could be really, really interesting players. And if I'm the Ottawa Senators, kind of are a boost in something that I do think they could use a little bit more of. So the names that come to mind, I mean, I think a Cullen Potter will be available there. I've got Cullen Potter really high, but he's a guy who's played center all year, but he just plays with so much sort of speed and just a wicked shooter. And I think he's a guy who will just get better with the faster pace of play as things get sort of ratcheted up a little bit. I think he developed a lot this season and got a lot more comfortable up the middle of the ice. Really, really good possession guy, one of the fastest guys in the draft. And the skill combination is really, really, really high end with him. And he very well could be there in that 20s range. He's a little smaller, but I think he's got the speed, the escape speed, the quickness to work around it. A guy like Bill Zonin, I have really high on my list. He's a guy out of Rune. He's a guy who I think, again, we mentioned it earlier, like that. Who do you win in the playoffs with? Like he's just a high, high floor energy center who can play on the wing if you need him to. But a guy again who I thought got a lot more comfortable and a lot better over the course of the season. Pretty good finisher as well, but largely just a really smart sort of puck moving guy who's relentlessly competitive. There are guys like Linden Lakovic who might be available there too, who I think might not be the best fit for what Ottawa likes to draft, but I think if you can sort of rewire him a little bit in terms of sort of the way he plays off the puck, especially, and you sort of also lean into the offensive skill he's got incredible tools for a big lanky guy like that, and so he's been a favorite of mine as well this year. The thing that's interesting is there's gonna be a lot of really intriguing options for me in that range. Like it's around the end of the area of the draft where I think it really, really opens up with really interesting players who I wouldn't say you expect like huge things in their career, but like they could be valuable, right? Like there's a lot of these guys that might slip to Ottawa that might be nice little pickups that you could get something really intriguing out of, and I think they also would resonate with something that Ottawa could use a little bit more of. But there's going to be some interesting ones available.
So now we'll go to the next part of
Oh yeah,
going from guys you really like to guys who fit that archetype that Ottawa has been trying to build for, I would say, since they drafted Brady Tkachuk back in
hmm
2018, of those hard-nosed players, gritty guys. You look at, players that might be a bit undersized, maybe like Ridley Gregg, but bring that kind of grit to their game. Of course, they drafted Tyler Clevin, who we know and love on this show.
right,
Recently signed to a 2-year extension with Ottawa. So they go after these guys that have that kind of physicality to their game, but also at least for Sens fans, we believe they offer up more than just that.
sure.
So looking at it from that perspective, who's a guy who you think might fit that mold that the Sens have continuously tried to build over the last few years?
So we just actually on the YouTube channel for Scouching, we just did a mock draft last night, and I had the joy of drafting for the Ottawa Senators at 21. And the name that I put down there is like so obviously an Ottawa Senator that it I I would be so excited if he became an Ottawa Senator because Shane Vansaghi is just such a just I don't know how much I can swear on this show, but he is a bad man. He is a guy who I don't think he's got a huge NHL ceiling. I don't think he's going to be like your Tim Stützle off wing guy, right? But I mean, you watch the NHL playoffs and you see guys like Will, like he really reminds me of like a Will Carrier, where there isn't no skill to his game, there isn't no finesse, but the hallmark of his game is just energy and physicality, and he's also had some moments this year where I kind of go, yeah, like if you can sort of keep this guy a little leaner, not necessarily be this 220 pound wrecking ball all the time, but you try to sort of refine the skill level a little bit, get him a little more confident hanging onto the puck and all that stuff. He's had some really, really interesting moments this year with the puck on his stick. And so to me, he just checks so many of those boxes. I mean, if you want someone a little bit more on the like greasy side of the coin with a little bit of like energy, I mean, he's probably a really good option. The other ones that pop out to me, I mean, Akeishan Aitchison probably is gone by then. It seems like he's going to be gone top 15, maybe top 10. So if I'm the Ottawa Senators, I would maybe think about, and I mean, I don't know how much people will like this, but like a Carter Amico, who is a 6'5" defenseman who blew out his knee early in the year this year and only played 13 games. But I actually like I hadn't seen him since the early days of the year, obviously, because he hasn't played. And in the last month, I went and watched him again in the context of all the other defensemen in this year's draft and just sort of went, all right, like I've had all this experience with the other guys. Let's go and sort of cleanse my brain a little bit with a guy from the last one of the last games he played. And I was really impressed with what he brought to the table. I mean, he was a guy who kind of was on my radar in the summer, and I didn't think he was particularly amazing in the beginning of the year. But watching him against, I think it was a game against Boston University, he's a guy who did not look out of place at the NCAA level. He was aggressive, really physical, but he's got great length, and he doesn't just chase after hits, which again, I'm not against physical play at all. It just has to be smart and effective, and that's the tough part. And with Amico, I think he does a really good job sort of juggling all those things. There's a lot of other options, I think, that could be interesting options for Ottawa here. Eddie Yenborg, but that might be a little high to draft a guy like that. Malcolm Spence might be available there. That could be another really interesting option that I would not be surprised to see in an Ottawa jersey. So they've got some options. And again, in that range, there are a lot of guys who could play this like bottom six energy physical role that again in an Ottawa Senators jersey would not look out of place whatsoever to me.
Totally. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you about is, how much weight do you believe that NHL amateur scouts put on chemistry? Of course, this will lead me to a follow-up question, but if you're in an NHL front office and you're looking at drafting a player, does having another player on the roster who is currently in your organization something that a front office may take into account and maybe give some confirmation bias or whatnot if they're watching that player and seeing like, oh, okay, I really like the chemistry this guy has with one of our other prospects. Is that something that we could bring into the fold and have develop and blossom here? Of course, we've seen that
Yeah.
with what Sens fans used to call the no Dak Sens with Shane Pinto,
Right.
JVD, Tyler Clevin, Jake Sanderson,
Yeah.
all coming up to the Ottawa Senators. So is that something that maybe teams take into account?
I mean, I think that's a really interesting question, but I think it really depends on what, there's a lot of things that might just have to come together for something like that to happen. I think you don't want to focus too much on, what there may be a pattern to that sort of no Dak Sens thing, but you look at all of the other guys they've drafted over the years, and there isn't really another example of something like that really sort of sticks out at you. Maybe Kitchener. There's a couple of guys on Kitchener that they've drafted, and UMass, there's a couple of guys they've drafted that are there, but in general, I don't think it's that much of a pattern. But I do think there is a bit of a thing where I think it is a lot easier to get a good read on a player if you're in a scouting department, if that player is already in your system. If there's a player already in your system who is a teammate of that player, it at least gives you a good look at them quite often. I don't think it should really affect your valuation of the player, but it does, I think, focus them in that sort of area. And it really, I think, depends on the team. It's so hard to say from an outside perspective, but in my experience, it may be a little bit of a factor. But I think a bigger factor is more of the broader patterns of like, well, does this team draft out of the CHL pretty reliably? Does this team really draft around the world? Does this team focus on Europe a little more, right? Like different teams have different strategies in that regard. And so maybe there are relationships, you look at Steve Stais, like, are we looking at them going out and drafting someone off the Brantford Bulldog or off the Bulldogs this year? Maybe. I don't know who that would be because I think like a Jake O'Brien will be gone. But maybe that'll be a factor because yeah, everything has to line up in a way. And maybe that's more common with college players. But for me, yeah, it really depends on the team, and it's an interesting thought. But yeah, I don't know if there's anyone in this class where when I look at the Ottawa Senators sort of pipeline here, the one that jumps out to me is that Ben Kindel has been playing with Carter Yakimchuk all season, and I love Ben Kindel, but I feel like he's the type of player that the Ottawa Senators might go, I don't think he's going to play in the NHL. Like we're just going to skip over him because we've seen him a bunch, and I just don't know if he checks the boxes for Ottawa. I mean, it'd be great if they took him because I love him, but I feel like he might not be up the same alley, and that so it might give you a better insight quicker into that type of a situation. But beyond that, I don't know. It's tough to say.
Now that is exactly who I was thinking of and who I was going to ask you about. So you
Okay.
read my mind. But yeah,
Yeah.
for those who didn't know, Benjamin Kindle, sorry, is a right winger playing on the Calgary Hitmen. Played with Carter Yakimchuk this season. Nearly cracked 100 points and had some great offensive flashes. I really like his wrist shot. And he seemed to have some good chemistry with Yakimchuk. So that is where I was asking that
Right.
question out of. So read my mind on that one. But out of curiosity, do you mind going into
Yeah.
more depth about Kindle as a player and
I'll
what you like
I,
about him?
yeah, I mean our full length report on him came out today, so there's that over on the
Perfect
YouTube
timing.
channel. So that's perfect timing. I mean, Ben Kindle, it's funny. It's a funny story for me because I had seen Kindle in the summer and I saw him last year here and there, like watching Yakimchuk and just in passing, watching for guys for this year. And I kind of felt like, yeah, he's like a fine sort of bottom six, like all situations guy. I kind of feel very similarly about him now, or then as I do sort of about a guy like Ethan Zada right now, where it's like, yeah, if you like him, you like him, and I'm not over the moon about him or whatever. But then I was actually at a rink once, I was talking with an NHL scout, and they basically were like, "Have you seen Ben Kindle?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah, here and there, like I saw him at the link or whatever." He's like, where do you think he's going to go? And I was like, I don't know, maybe second, third round, something like that. He's like, you should probably go watch more Ben Kindle and let me know what you think. And I'm like, okay. And so I watched I tracked a game of him. I tracked data from one game of him, and then I watched another one, and I just kind of went, oh, I get it now. And I texted him, and I went, this guy is sick now. What happened? And he goes, yeah, I have him at like 12 now for my list so far this year. And look, Kindle is not perfect, I think, and the thing about him that I think the Senators might be a little turned off about is that he is a little small, and he is definitely not a physical guy. That is not his game at all. But what he is one of the most efficient players I've seen in a long time. Like he is, I would say, he's not a flashy skill guy. He's not that high pace, high energy guy, but he is smart. Like he is in the right place all of the time. He's making the right plays almost all of the time. He is a machine generating offense for both himself and line mates. Like he is getting scoring chances a lot of the time. He's going to the net and doing the things you need a hockey player to do. Really good forechecking ability, really great off puck reads. And if you can be okay with a supportive minded person as opposed to like a physically minded player, he'll find open space, he'll be supportive of a board battle, and then he knows what to do with the puck once it hits his stick. Like I've seen him airmail passes, like two line passes that just are way like it's crazy. At the CHL prospect series against the NTDP team, I went into that game going like I'm really excited to see what Kindle can do. And I think it was the first goal of the turn of the series, and it was like a three line pass from Kindle that was just absolutely beautiful. And I forget who he sprung on a breakaway, but it everyone in the scouting area just sort of all at once went whoa, like it was pretty
Nice.
wild. And so with Kindle, I'm a huge fan of him. He's a little lower on my list than he was at his peak, but I do think that, in the same way that we've seen a guy like maybe an Easton Cowan sort of develop into more of a hard-nosed, competitive, you know, pass first guy, but just a really, really good pass first guy. There are a little bit of similarities there with Kindle. And I think Kindle, again, I think there's risk with him, but I mean, I watch him play and he just seems to have such a great understanding of the game and where things are happening around him and how to hit guys with the right passes and timing and all kinds of stuff where I'm just sort of going like this, he just gets it. Like he just is so smart that any improvement from here with regards to like that skill level, that skating ability, the physicality, like it should just round things out really, really well. So I've really enjoyed watching him all season long, and I think he's right there with a lot of other really, really good players in this year's class.
Yeah, and speaking to the passing, I mean, again, I'm a filthy casual right now when it comes to looking at prospects. Gone are the days where I'm like, oh, which top 5, 10 player are the Sens potentially going to get? So a little different this year, but
Right.
again, I'll give a little shout out to Flux CC on YouTube. I was watching, his highlight montage of Kindle, and yeah, he had a really nice, like you said, like 2-3 line pass to Yakubchuk to spring Yakubchuk on a breakaway. Who I don't know why Yakubchuk was there, but
Oh, I
whatever.
do.
Yeah.
That's what he does, son.
Regardless, Yakubchuk scored, and it was pretty dope to watch. And I was like, ooh,
Right.
that might be a little nasty combination if the Sens ended up going that route. But yeah.
If it happens, he very well could be there, and if it happens, I would enjoy that. It would surprise me, but he's a great player. I think he's got a lot of potential. There might be a low floor, but really, really, really great player. I feel like he'd interview extremely well as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll move on to my next question for you, which is Ottawa doesn't have a 2025 second round pick. However, they do have Florida's third round selection, which will
Mm.
probably nearly be a fourth round selection by the time the playoffs are done. But is there a player, in the late third, early fourth round, potentially even a goaltender who you think could be available and might be like a good pickup at that point in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a really, really big fan of a Slovak playing in Sweden, Michael Spirch. Again, I think I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the Ottawa Senators, and he's the type of player that I think they should really like, but they might not because he's not very big. And I think with Spirch, like he's played in the SHL for I think 18, 20 games this year. And every single time I've seen him, I watched him at the junior level and he was quite good there. But I think when you see guys at that level who then jump up into the SHL, you really see what they're capable of. And I think that was a really eye-opening experience. Like he is energetic, he is fast, he's agile, he's aggressive. He's just a great forechecker. He puts his shoulder in the way and drives down low and tries to get pucks in front of the net. And he does so at a really high pace of play, high energy, and things that I think you need in the NHL, especially for a 5'10", guy like that. I don't know how much like pure offense you're going to get out of him in the NHL if he ever makes it, but that's a guy who I think is worth a bet as much as anyone else. And if he's there in that range, you go for it. I think at that point in the draft, some of the best players available will be more offensive leaning, energetic guys. Like if an LJ Mooney is there, probably not going to happen if you're Ottawa. But again, if you can sort of set aside the height, he is one of the most active physical players in the draft. Like he is all over the place. He is definitely not a guy who floats around waiting for offense. He is a generator. But being a little more realistic, like if we're talking third round, I mean, it's really tricky to know who's going to be there. But like a Theo Stockselius could be an interesting bet. Again, not a super physical guy, but he's tall, really lanky, pretty young, but really skilled. And I mean, I look at a guy like I don't know, maybe like a Drake Batherson, right? Who like the I think he's come a long way with regards to his skating ability from what I remember over the years, but his sort of skill level and like sort of 200-foot overall sort of impact and moving the puck, like it's decent from what I've seen of him. And I think that like lankiness is kind of helpful for a guy like Stuxelius. I mean, like a Sean Barnhill, maybe if he's available there, 6'5", right-hand shot defenseman. I think just because of that, he'll probably go before a third round pick at the end of the third round. But if he's there, that's a guy who I would not be surprised to see go to Ottawa either. Will Bell, another 6'4" something winger for the NTDP. I've really liked him all year. With Bell, it's like I've wanted him to be he's 90% of the way to like a really fun, aggressive, like Vansaghi like player, but he just doesn't have it enough, like as many shifts as you want. And I've seen him just like dangle some guys, which catches you by surprise. But I think there's potential because he's not slow. He gets up and down the ice really well. He's willing to get physical. It's just going to be a matter of like motivating him to do that. There's going to be some interesting options, I think, and some that I think could be unconventional, but fit Ottawa, and some more conventional picks for Ottawa that I think could really fit that probably will be available in that range.
Now, shifting focus to goaltenders, are there any who stood out to you in this draft class at all, or is it maybe one of those classes where fewer goalies get taken?
I'm gonna be honest. I look at goaltenders on vibes. Like I go after the data that I can dig up with the providers that I have to sort of see the raw sort of facts about what is happening with goaltenders. And I do watch them. Like I think that when you watch NHL goaltenders and the best, like a lot of them are very athletic, very sort of positionally sound. They're not overstepping their posts. They're not back in their net too much. They're not relying too much on their athleticism, but the athleticism is like a tool to help them get around the crease and track play and all that stuff. So that's the kind of thing that I focus on a lot. I mean, my favorite goaltender this year is Pyotr Andrianov, who is a Russian playing in Moscow for the Red Army team, and I really like him. He's not big. I think he's only like 5'11", 6 feet tall, something like that, but he is athletic as it gets. His numbers this year are unbelievable. And I mean, he doesn't face a particularly hard workload on that team. At least it's easier than it was at the beginning of the year. But he stops a lot of hockey pucks from those scoring areas when he does face those opportunities. Better than a lot of other goaltenders. But granted, again, it's not the highest level of competition. I know everybody's talking about Ravensburgen. I thought Ivan Kovic was fantastic at the U18s, and I've liked him most of the time I've seen him this year. Outside of that, I mean, it's kind of a bit of a crapshoot, right? Like one of my favorite goaltenders this year is a 20-year-old in Russia who played a couple of games at the men's level this year that I loved, Sergei Dolgov, but he's just all athleticism. He's a bit of a crazy man in net, but I love that kind of thing, and he's been a lot of fun. And so for me, it's like seventh round pick. If there's nobody else you like, you may as well take a swing on a goalie you like, right? But I mean, there's a few people are talking about, but I can't say that I've dug in and have enough background knowledge to give you a really great answer. But there are guys that I've seen, like Andrianov and Ivan Kovic, I'd say are the two that really stuck out that, in those third, fourth, fifth rounds, if they're there, I don't know if they will be, I would take a swing. But there could be some interesting goalies coming out of this draft. There always are guys that pop out of nowhere, and maybe Ottawa will find one.
Now, we focused on Ottawa and players they could select and whatnot, but obviously you scour some of the lists that are put out there by some of the more popular draft experts, or at
Mhm.
least draft analysts or whatnot. Now, are there any guys who you've seen the aggregated lists and whatnot, and you look at and you're like, I really think that they're sleeping on X player? Is there someone like that that you've kind of noticed?
Yeah, I mean, I would throw an Eric Nilsson on there, Swedish center playing in Stockholm. Like, I love him. I've watched him since last season. He was on a different team last year. He moved to your garden this year, and I love everything he brings to the game. The only thing about him is that he's a little physically underdeveloped. I think he's like 155 pounds, but I think both of his parents are pretty tall, and the expectation in Stockholm is he's going to grow a little more and fill out, and because he has all of the tools and the brain to be an excellent 200-foot center in the NHL. He's got a lot of speed. He's got skating ability. He's got really, really good passing ability. Again, similar to Kindle. Like he's a bit like Kindle, but a bit bigger in the sense of he just has such a great view of the ice and uses his line mates so well. And I mean, similar to Kindle, I wouldn't say he's like a lethal shooting threat from like mid range or something, but he gets his chances. He gets some good chances a lot of the time, but more of his game is best suited to like driving the puck up the ice and chipping in defensively and doing the hard work that helps better, like more offensively leaning skilled guys do the job. I mentioned Cullen Porter earlier. That's a player who I think has all the potential in the world to be one of the more exciting players to come out of this draft. I also mentioned Bill Zonin as well. I'll be very curious to see what happens with Carter Bear. I know Carter Bear, he's a player that's not ranked particularly low on average, but he is a player that you never know. Teams might go, do we really want to take a kid who busted his Achilles this year? Maybe not. And they skip him. And next thing you know, he's like a Peyton Krebs style pick where I think he went 20th or something like that. And maybe that's a target that the Sens could have that I think at 21 is a no brainer to take the chance on. And I think he'd fit in perfectly with kind of how the Senators operate. So, I mean, the other one too is I think the one that is most egregious at the top is Victor Eklund. I mean, I know he's ranked 6, 7, 8 ish on average, but I love him. I have him right in that top group, where I think he brings so much energy and so much skill. And he had such unbelievable metrics this year playing for a men's team all year long that it's hard to ignore. And I think that, maybe his NHL upside is like a high end scorer is a little limited. I think he's a guy that you win games with, right? Like he was playing for his team, the men's league team, through their playoffs in a pretty big role, and they ended up getting promoted to the SHL. Like you don't give ice time to a 17, 18-year-old kid like that in the playoffs in a men's league in Sweden unless you really believe in them. And he was the one getting the ice time. So and I see, well, and it doesn't take long to see why. So there's quite a few of them this year, I think. And that's not unusual, but definitely those guys I'd say in order from like the lowest on average that I have quite a bit higher to like the guys that are, Eklund's pretty high, but I like him a little more than the guys that are a little bit ahead of him.
Okay, I've got one more kind of more serious question, then like a
All
fun
right.
question to end off the show.
Yeah.
So last serious question. It's more of a hypothetical though. So you're in an NHL front office. Picture this.
Uh-oh. Oh, God help the fans.
Yeah. It's not the Ottawa Senators. You are
Okay.
safe from being
Yeah.
stabbed,
Breathe.
and you won't have your Shrek swamp moment where the mob is
Right.
coming after you.
Yep.
But they're debating on which player to take, and you're sitting there at the table. You stand up and you bang your fist on the table and you say, I think we should draft this guy. Who's the player that you are going to stand up and go for bat for if your team was? It could be any like round you want. If like you can choose, kind of it kind of maybe goes in line with the sleeper pick question. If there's a guy that is available that you just really like, you think some teams might pass on, but you would, put your job on the line for a certain player if it came down to it.
I mean, for me, the easy answer is Cullen Porter. Like, I don't quite understand why people are down on him. I mean, I get it. Like, I've spoken to people about him, and I get the criticism of why. Like, I have him in the top 10. I think he is extraordinarily talented, and the potential is so high. And this year's draft, I think, is going to be marked by guys who are you could use the word safer. They're projectable, they're more physical, they're bigger, they play that like bolder hockey. They can absorb pressure, they can make plays, they can keep it simple and play hockey. But I prefer players that like bring a level of excitement and a level of energy, and like at the end of the day, you're in the entertainment business, not, I get it, you're in the winning business as well. But a guy like Cullen Porter, I think people kind of underestimate just how hard of a job he had this year. They put him at center at Arizona State University. They ended up, I believe this was their first season where they ended up as a nationally ranked team at the end of the year. I could be wrong on that, but it's a relatively recent phenomenon for ASU. They weren't even part of a conference until a couple of years ago. And so for Cullen Porter to march in here as one of the two 2007 born players this year, and step into a center's role in the NCAA and play some really good programs. And in my work, he drove really good results in a lot of different areas. And I think he's underratedly energetic off the puck as well. And I think he got better at that as the year went on. That's a guy who I think very quickly in this year's draft becomes the most exciting option out there, right? Like he is fast and he is skilled. And I think the frustrating thing with him is like the number of times I saw this a bunch at the U18s, which drove me nuts, but like he'll rip up the ice in open ice with the puck. And there will be a guy at the offensive blue line standing alone, ready for the give and go kind of thing, right? And he'll skate right into both defensemen instead, or he'll try to chip it through it, and then it'll get knocked down, and he'll just sort of look off those like lateral ideas. And that's the kind of thing where I'm going, yeah, that's gonna piss off and frustrate everybody who coaches you from here. But at the end of the day, I'm betting on the talent level. And I think with him, yeah, I don't think he's a traditional bottom six forward on an NHL team, but I mean, God, if he turns out to be even just a winger, and a second line scoring winger, like I'm trying to think of an NHL player that he kind of reminds me of. I've seen people talk about like Nick Robertson as a guy that Cullen Porter kind of plays like, and on one hand, I see where they're coming from, but I don't know. I think there's a lot more there in terms of puck possession skill and creativity and all these things that I think Potter brings. The last thing I'll say is I also love thinking about the thought experiment of take a Logan Cooley and put him at the University of Minnesota when he's 17, right? Would he have 13 goals? Would he be like 2/3 of a point a game as a 17-year-old playing in the NCAA as a 5'9" center, right? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but it's a lot easier to score a lot and look really good when you're a highly skilled, highly offensively talented player when you're playing junior competition than the NCAA. And so my whole thing is he jumped to the NCAA. I'd love to interview him and pick his brain about why that happened, what he's learned, all that stuff. But he's a guy who, I mean, when you really boil things down, I love him. I know some people are not as high on him. I get it, but considering the role he put himself in this year, how well he's done, I would pound that table pretty hard in this year's draft, probably towards the back half of the top 10 into the middle 10. And God forbid if he's there for the Ottawa pick at 21, I would be thinking, yeah, that's the guy I would go for.
Awesome. Thanks for that
That's the
detailed
guy.
answer.
Yes.
But all right, the fun question, and this kind of goes back to what we talked about before we start recording today. So for those of you who obviously weren't privy to our conversation, unless we've been hacked, we were talking about some of the most wild jerseys that we have seen. And the one I brought up to Will was the SpongeBob SquarePants jersey that the Saskatoon Blades sported this year. And I will throw it up on the video version. For those of you who are listening to audio, please look up Saskatoon Blades SpongeBob SquarePants jersey. Please let me know your thoughts on that. But Will, for you, I was going to ask, junior jerseys, they always have these wild theme nights accompanied by some of the most either beautiful jerseys or disasters you've ever seen. That's one thing I love about junior. And so on that, in 2025, what is your least favorite jersey you've seen rocked in junior and your favorite jersey that you've seen in junior?
So my favorite one is easy because I actually went and spent the money and bought one. But my favorite jersey I saw this year was the Brampton Steelheads fan design contest winning jersey, which it is my sense of humor incarnate. It is a fish holding a hockey stick over his head in a big square and it is just blocky and awesome and cartoonish, and it is wonderful. The Brampton Steelheads had some absolute banger jerseys this year. So yeah, I can't fault the Brampton Steelheads one bit for all of the jerseys they wore this year. The ugliest, I mean, the SpongeBob jersey is pretty close. I would say, oh man, I would say that what was that team at the 16U Nationals? So they didn't play like NHL draft level hockey, but it was the East Coast Militia 16U AAA hockey team. They wore purple jerseys with black numbers and letters, and it was like a dark purple. And the names on the nameplates were very, very tiny. and they were all in that font. It's hard to explain what the font is, but it's almost like bubble letters, but like calligraphy bubble letters. And you'd know it if you saw it. And the numbers were like gigantic, but still illegible. And I had to watch one of those games and like write down who was standing out on that team and all that stuff. And I love what I do, helping out puckpreps.com. Shout out Puck Preps. But my God, that team was agonizing. But I gotta also say, I think those SpongeBob jerseys, like I'm all about SpongeBob. You know, I had a younger sister right in the SpongeBob era. You mentioned that you loved SpongeBob. We both mentioned our parents. Hey, there's no shame in loving
No.
SpongeBob, my friend. He rules. SpongeBob is a prophet for all humanity.
Wow.
And yeah,
I'm
but those
quoting you on that,
jerseys
by the
though,
way.
those yeah, feel free. Hey, he's the man. But yeah, those ones were a mess. There are definitely other ones. Like one of the things also I will say, it wasn't a jersey, but I think it was for breast cancer awareness, something like that, in the USHL. But a team dyed their rink pink, and that was tricky. That was a tough one to watch. Obviously a great cause and everything, but all those hockey players flying around on a grainy 720p video feed on pink ice, that was a little tricky. That was definitely tricky.
Yeah, now I looked up the militia jersey, and I'll make sure to include it in the video. And yeah, that one is not great. Not
Yeah,
great for sure.
it's bad. And on camera, it's worse. So yeah, not awesome.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I've kept you for long enough. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Sadly, Matt and Bennett were down for the count, unable to make it, but asked a couple questions in their stead. So hopefully those guys can listen to the pod, and hopefully I represented well. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll be back, and they can get their fill then, take their licks.
yeah, when Ottawa's picking 32nd next year, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now
Oh
we're
wait, they
talking.
won't have a pick. They forfeited
Right.
it because the dad. No, damn it.
Yeah.
And they better be picking 32nd.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything that you want to plug before we end the show off tonight?
Yeah, I mentioned I work for puckpreps.com. I usually help out on the U18s and 16U nationals on that side of things, some summer tournaments as well. So puckpreps.com, really, really good resource for OHL, CHL, QMJHL draft stuff, USHL, whatever, college mostly. But also, yeah, I run scouching.ca, which we have a YouTube channel, Scouching, which is, I think, pretty cool. We do long form reviews of all the video and the data that I track on all these players. We're putting out 3 of them a week, and we're really just, grindstoning from here until the end of the month. We're going to do a live show for the draft as well, so you will not want to miss that one. We haven't done that in a while, but that's going to be fun. And yeah, you can check that out. We also have subscription plans over there. So if you want access to the data that I track, or we have a Discord server that's a good time, you can check that out. And all the tiers explain what you'll get at those tiers. So yeah, scouching.ca, puckpreps.com. And we do live shows as well, Monday evenings, 8 p.m. and Eastern time, I should say, and Tuesday afternoons, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And those are always a lot of fun, especially this time of the year, because yeah, people have things to say. So that's always a good time.
Yeah, the chat is probably the best part about the streams.
It
No
is
offense.
the best. Yeah, it is the best. No, you're not wrong. Yeah, you're not wrong. We had a good one yesterday that said that someone mentioned that they somehow found out that Lightning McQueen is older than Roger McQueen.
Wow.
Yeah, which kind of made me feel ancient because I was a teenager when Cars came out and I saw Lightning McQueen for the first time. But good movie, though. It's a good movie. So I
Yeah.
don't feel that bad.
Top of his draft class too, actually.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Elite prospect.
Great wheels, I've heard.
Oh, oh my God. All right.
This is where
And
the
on
show
that
ends. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Will. And I'm sure we'll have you on again sometime soon. Thank you very much.
man. Yeah.